Mm. Pardon me. Good morning. I may do that a bit this seminar. As you may or may not be aware, last week I had COVID. That was lots of fun having COVID. I'm pretty late to the party. I feel like most people have already had COVID by now. So for me to get it, I'm kind of one of the stragglers. So I won't tell you too much about my experience because I'm sure it was a lot like yours. But COVID really sucked for me. I got a really bad fever and aches and all that stuff, and I was bedridden for days. It was not fun. It's not fun, and you'll hear I still have a lingering cough and throat thing. There's lots of mucus and my body fighting something. I don't know. But I do test negative. I have for the last few days. So luckily things are more or less back to normal. But that really kicked my butt. It was not fun. So I'm glad to be through with it, and still not sure we need to shut the world down for that. It sucked, but I don't know that everything needs to grind to a halt just because you get a cold or a flu that sucks. But it is what it is. Oh, pardon me. And of course, when I get COVID and take a week off, a bunch of really interesting, not investing, but news things happen. Right? It was definitely an exciting week, or pair of weeks. These last two, obviously, Queen Elizabeth. I think that's right? Is it Queen Elizabeth? I don't even know what the Queen's name is. The Queen, anyways. She's dead. So, bye, Felicia. I'm not a huge fan of the monarchy. I mean, I don't hate them or anything, but I also don't understand why anybody likes them. I'll never understand that. I don't get it. They did nothing to be where they are, and they don't really do much for us. So I don't understand why people like them, but I don't hate them. So she's passed on, and I think that probably the Queen and the monarchy in general have played relatively small roles in all of our lives. That being said, that woman has been the Queen for 60-something years. So there are fully senior citizens who have never lived in a world that was not ruled over by Miss Elizabeth there. So we will see how much, if at all, the British monarchy still matters politically in the coming months and years as the world adapts to the rule of her son. Is his name Charles? Like I said, not even remotely a monarchist. There was a time when I thought it was death to the monarchy because they're just trouble, but I've softened on that view just because I think I'm not so sure that the alternative is any better. So they all these ruling class people suck one way or the other. So we'll just leave it at that. Anyways, she passed. I don't think it affected real estate much. Probably had a small impact on the stock market. And it may, longer term, depending on, whether her transition of power has any impact politically, it could come around to affect real estate markets as people choose or don't choose to migrate to either former Commonwealth countries like Canada or countries like England, or obviously there's a big basis of Indian migration to Canada, but also to the UK. Maybe the death of the monarch will convince more of those Indian migrants to go to Canada versus England, or vice versa, affecting demand in either country for real estate. So it's something to kind of watch. I mean, it won't be a huge factor one way or the other. We also found out this week, for those of you who follow Canadian politics, and again, if you don't feel bad, it's a waste of your time, but I know because I'm on the email list, that Pierre Poilievre was elected the leader of the Canadian Conservative Party. And, politics are such a hard thing to talk about because you're talking about liars who are lying. But I think things are a little different with Pierre. I mean, I'm not going to say he's not a liar. He's a politician. That's his job. But I do think he's probably one of the more honest politicians we've seen in a while. That's my estimation of things. And I supported him to lead the Conservative Party in the hopes that he'd run against whoever in the upcoming election. Full disclosure of my connection to him and what they're doing. But yeah, he won, so he will be the leader of the Conservative Party, which should make absolutely zero difference to our lives, at least for the next 2 years. He was an aggressive critic of Justin Trudeau before he ever threw his hat into the leadership race. That's kind of what he got pretty famous for, right? Or what brought a lot of attention to him, so maybe a better way to phrase it. So he will probably continue to criticize Trudeau and be a thorn in his side. At the moment, the Liberals, with the help of the NDP, have a solid political basis to rule from. So until there's a schism between those two groups, Justin Trudeau is going to continue to be prime minister. And he's got 3.5 years or whatever left on his term, if he can hold his political alliance together. So for those 3.5 years, Pierre and the Conservatives will basically be on the sideline, obviously doing outreach and whatever. It's 3.5 years for the powers that be to try to corrupt this young upstart politician and drag him more into the mud than he has thus far been. And I'm sure they will have some success because it's politics. But hopefully he makes it out of these next couple of years relatively unscathed. And if he's willing to do a half or even a quarter of the things that he's talked about with regards to liberalizing markets, freeing them up, removing regulation. I mean, if he's serious about those things, Canada could see a real economic revitalization under his leadership. And I want to be clear, his leadership won't really be doing anything, right? It's the free market that will be doing it, but he says he supports the free market and he wants to get us back to a freer market. So if he did that, that would certainly be good for the economy, be good for investors, be good for savers. I mean, it's pretty much good for everybody long term. Short term, it is bad for anybody who currently gets their living by stealing from the rest of us vis-a-vis the government, and that's a large group of people, which is of course why less liberal governments, liberal in the true sense, tend to do so well in Canada, because so many people work in the in the public or public adjacent sectors. So those are some things that happen, and we'll have to keep an eye on them to see, what happens with them. Obviously, if things become politically unstable for Justin Trudeau in the near term, then the election of Pierre Poilievre will become much, much more relevant, right? And could potentially have, let's say, market-oriented impacts, and sooner than expected, right? Certainly, like if if he were to truly deregulate a lot of the construction and real estate markets, I mean, we would see a glut of new builds, which would devalue existing housing stock. So that could be potentially painful short term for investors who misallocated resources. And it would really change the dynamic, because right now we have this very speculative investment market that's speculating on this passive appreciation, this passive asset value growth. And that would really have to pivot to a more active development-oriented investment, where developers have been unleashed to go build and create value, and you as an investor would be wise, to say the least, to kind of take notice of that and invest there. Now, for anyone who's an individual who is saying to themselves, okay, Aaron, that's kind of neat. I guess if those things change, that'll be good, it sounds like. But how do I take advantage? How do I prosper from this? Well, I mean, now's a good time to be doing prep work, right? Lay the foundation, save as much money as you can, and build up that nest egg. In a perfect world, you'd become an accredited investor in the next 2 or 3 years, which means you're going to need $250,000 of assets under management or in the bank, and then to apply for accreditation. It sounds harder than it is. That's really 1 or 2 good real estate deals away for any given person. But that is what you could do, because accredited investors can get in early on development deals here in Canada. Thank you, government, for unnecessary protections. And that would be wise, because if the economy transitions politically and economically to a freer market, then we will see more development, and you'll be less able to speculate. It would be it would depend on exactly how things go politically, what gets deregulated and et cetera first. In theory, it would be very good for landlords. At least in Ontario, we have a very restrictive regime, which obviously handcuffs us as landlords from raising rents and things of that nature. Deregulation could mean that would change, which would be very, very interesting. Pardon me. Even if there was some reform of, for example, the landlord-tenant board and that whole process, it's very hard to say, because he's a federal leader, and a lot of these are provincial matters. And so what impact they'll be able to have on these things is very hard to gauge. But that's what's coming up. We're also, today's September 11th. It's 21 years after the September 11th, which is crazy to think about. Time is really, really strange. I remember growing up as a kid, and you'd hear people talk about like Pearl Harbor and stuff like that, or things that happened in the 80s and and earlier time periods. And just fascinating how time absolutely flies on us, right? Now it's 21 years after 9/11, and obviously it's not the same. It's not the same thing 20 years later, right? We don't remember it quite the same way. Obviously, it was a crappy thing that happened, and we're all of a generation where we definitely remember it. It had a big impact on us, at least psychologically, and maybe socially if you look at the world. And I think probably there are a lot of things geopolitically that are happening in the world today that you can, if you wanted to, tie back directly to that day, September 11th, and some of the choices that we, or at least the leaders of our societies, made on that day and during that crisis. Obviously, we saw the government for our own good, of course, pass, laws like the Patriot Act, restrict travel access, which of course we saw get hopped up on steroids with COVID a few years ago. So, it's a day that it's good to remember, at least for people to mark, to know that the world wasn't always this way, even if probably most of my audience is a bit too young to really remember what the world was like prior to it. But it's just one of those things. It's funny that is the 21-year anniversary today. And of course, we've got the Bank of Canada, probably the last thing that was in the news. The Bank of Canada was expected to hike interest rates at the beginning of September, and then there was some hesitancy, and people are wondering if the political will is there for the Bank of Canada to continue adjusting interest rates when they've already caused a lot of harm, I guess you could say, in the market, certainly on paper. We have watched for the last 8-9 months now as interest rates have hiked. We have seen a decline in housing prices across markets here in Canada, which is to be expected. Obviously, if the cost of future money increases, then the price you could pay with current money decreases, right? So raising interest rates diminishes the demand for things, or at least people's capacity to pay for those things. So we've seen that here in the GTA. We've seen between $100,000 and $300,000 price cuts, depending on where you look or what segment of the market you're looking at. And in other markets, things haven't been nearly as dramatic, but still we've seen prices holding or falling in a lot of cases. Now, that bank hike was predicted to be between 75 and 100 basis points, right? So 0.75% to 1% hike. And the commentators are worried that perhaps the Bank of Canada has lost its nerve. And this is, of course, one of the problems with the central bank instead of a free market system, is that it is people who are deciding when and how to make these changes. And people are susceptible to all the flaws and faults of people. They get nervous, they get scared, they get anxious, they want to be liked, etc., etc. It's probably very hard if you work at the Bank of Canada and you are some elite prick who rubs elbows with the rich and powerful of Canadian society, and you're the guy who's single-handedly responsible for making all of these people that substantially poorer over the last 8 or 9 months. It's hard probably to go hang out with your friends and then tell them, hey, by the way, I'm gonna make you another $10 million poorer or whatever it is, right? So truly an impossible job. I don't have sympathy for the people who do it. I think that the whole arrangement is in many ways monstrous and very, very bad. But, if you were going to ask someone to do an impossible job, that is basically it right there in a nutshell for you. So the Bank of Canada will be interesting to watch. I think most parties agree, like interested parties, not political parties, that these rate hikes do need to continue, at least in the short term. And it'll be very fascinating to see if the Bank of Canada is actually has the political will to go forward with them. Obviously, for investors, rate hikes are going to mean more expensive money for buying. It's going to mean, present prices have to fall further so that people can continue to afford them, since really the purchasing power of the economy hasn't moved, right? So if we just increase the cost of future money, we're basically decreasing the supply of money, which is, again, good. It's what needs to happen. After years of irresponsibly printing money, you need to contract the money supply. That's why they're doing what they're doing. But that's not to say that is not without some pain. It is going to be painful, especially for certain segments of the economy, right? Certain people who've invested or misinvested based on the signals they've received from that cheap money. And so it's something to keep your eyes on. Now with real estate, assuming that you're investing in cash flowing real estate, then you're not too exposed to the risk on this one. You may see your short-term valuations fall. Certainly, I have properties that I probably should have sold about a year ago if I wanted to maximize their valuation, which I didn't. So now they're worth less than they would have been a year ago. But they're still making money on the cash flow side of things, right? So they're okay. And they're certainly still up from, say, 3 years ago, right? So that's something to keep in mind. We've got to keep perspective that while the investment market has become a little bit more difficult, right? It's a little bit harder. At the end of the day, even with all of these interest rate moves and the political uncertainty and the blah, 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 I mean, at the end of the day, if you buy an asset today, even if it's an underperforming asset or even if it's a slightly overperforming asset, chances are in the next 3 to 5 years, that asset is going to perform very, very well relative to the market. And a part of that is just, when you really appreciate and understand what it means to have a fiat currency like the Canadian dollar or the US dollar or the Japanese yen or the Chinese renminbi, whatever, these currencies aren't worth the paper that they're printed on, right? Fundamentally. And so in competition against real money, right, which real money is and has always been assets or commodities of some sorts. Usually it was a commodity, right? Gold, silver, seashells, etc. Against the value of those things, the dollar must continue to struggle. And so if your choices are between holding fiat currency and holding assets, even in a market as uncertain as the one that we're currently in, longer term, your assets are going to continue to outperform dollars, period. That's just a pretty blanket statement. Could be made about almost any piece of property in Canada. Now, realistically, there are obviously things that are overvalued. You can overpay for things. You can lose money, of course. And so that's why we have to be mindful, and we have to continually be doing analysis and evaluations of our own asset portfolio, as well as looking to acquire and keeping our eyes and ears open for opportunities to add to our asset portfolio. But over time, those assets are going to continue to snowball. You're purchasing these assets with leverage, right? You're using debt. So time is your friend, right? Because it's helping you pay off that debt. It's helping you to collect someone else's money to pay the monthly debt service on that property, right? Which is a huge factor, right? Obviously, as the cost of borrowing increases or decreases, that's hurting people's ability to buy and own property, right? The equation, the calculus is a little different for an investor, though, because you're not the one who's making that mortgage payment. Obviously, within reason, you can't just arbitrarily increase your rent to cover the cost of your mortgage. So you are stuck to some degree with how much you can afford to pay for things. But at the end of the day, that $1,200, $1,800, $2,500 for mortgage payments is supposed to be coming from at least primarily your tenants, right? And so it shouldn't be a huge concern for you. That's something that I think, certainly if you listen to the media too much, like just the regular old news media or whatever, and they're busy hyping their fear because that's what they love to do, then it's easy to be, I guess, a little bit afraid or hesitant, thinking that, well, because we've got this sort of asset bubble, which we do, and because we've got the Bank of Canada and other political economic entities moving in the direction of higher interest rates, less freely, cheaply available money, that perhaps we as investors should be afraid. This is a market that should induce some hesitation. I think it's always true. You should be a little bit hesitant, right? You should try to make your moves strategically, right? Not impulsively. But in general, the fundamentals of the market and the economy and just of kind of how life works are still very, very, very heavily weighted in favor of the investor, even right now today. If you've seen your property lose $300,000 of value in the GTA in the last year, that's gotta hurt, right? First of all, what was that property worth, right? If we could speak in percentages instead of scary gross numbers, right? For most properties, we're talking about a drop that's less than 10%, right? So when you factor that in, okay, a drop that's less than 10%, okay, obviously would suck to lose 10%, especially on the order of $300,000. I mean, that's 10% on 3 mil. That would suck. And obviously, in Toronto, it's not necessarily that hard to have a $3 million property. So it's not necessarily that hard to lose 10% on it. But, excuse me, if we put that in perspective, we probably got up to as high as 8, 10, 12% asset inflation in the last year or two. That's the reason we're doing these hikes, right? Which means that in the previous year, you made $300,000 or close to $270,000, whatever it was, on that property as it was climbing that asset bubble, right? So if you're an investor who's been in the market for any period of time, you've captured some of the unreasonable gains on the run up to this bubble. So now that air is being let out of the bubble, yeah, okay, you're not at that peak level that you were at the top of the bubble, but you're up from where you purchased possibly by quite a lot. I know I certainly am, right? And so that is the thing that we need to keep in the back of our minds, right? Is that yes, obviously there's risk with all things, and yes, of course there's more uncertainty in the market than there was a year and a half ago. That's true, right? But you can still be certain that these assets are going to perform, right? Again, assuming you buy the right ones, right? You can't just throw. I wish I had enough money actually to run this experiment. I was gonna say you can't just throw a dart at a map of the Toronto, for example, and buy whatever it lands on. Though I'm curious if you just randomly bought real estate, how your portfolio would perform. I'm actually super curious. I wonder if one day maybe we could run that experiment somehow. But anyways, you're probably not going to throw a dart and make your decisions that way, right? But assuming you're buying assets that meet your criteria at the time of acquisition, that is the cash flow or at least cash flow neutral. They hopefully have some upside on the appreciation front, maybe active appreciation, some deferred maintenance or other value that you can add to the property, right? They're in a location where you are confident in the fundamentals, where you believe that there's future, there's growth, there's opportunity. If you have all of those things, you should be buying. And we should not be allowing fear or anxiety to cloud or disrupt that decision, right? Because at the end of the day, investing is supposed to be a rational act, right? And if we look at the market rationally, which is difficult, of course, but if we do, historically, real estate has been performing exceptionally well. The average returns for probably the last 80 years have been like 10 to 12% when you consider both cash flows and asset appreciation. And so it's really one of those situations where as market confidence kind of falls, right, we need to recommit ourselves to understanding that, okay, yeah, maybe the market is not confident. Maybe we're hearing bad news on the news. Maybe friends and family are talking to us and telling us, oh, nobody can make money in this market. Oh, blah, 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 blah. The good times were 20 years ago, et cetera, whatever the things are that are kind of in the milieu. We have to recognize that actually, yeah, that might be true, but it's got to go in one ear and out the other. At the end of the day, there's an ancient native, maybe it's not ancient, but there's a Native American saying that translates roughly to say, the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. The second best time to plant a tree is today, right? So recognition that there may have been a better time to do what you're doing, but there's no better time than now to do the right thing that you should be doing, right? So investing is that thing where, yes, of course, 20 years ago, let's say, I hope you're investing more than real estate, right? So let's say you put 5-10% of your income into stocks or something like that. Not a lot, but at least some. Diversify a little bit, right? Let's just say. So let's say you buy index funds because you don't know what to buy. That's kind of me. I don't want to pay too much attention to the stock market. And in your index fund, you got some Google and some Tesla and some Apple and some Amazon. If you bought that 20 years ago, you made lots of money. You made lots of money, right? All those companies, with the exception of Tesla, existed 20 years ago, and you could have made a lot of money on them in the last 20 years. And if you did, good for you. And if you didn't, that doesn't mean don't buy stocks, right? That's the situation we have with real estate, with all investments, right? Is it might be true that buying Google or Amazon 20 years ago was one of the greatest, most fantastic wealth creation opportunities, perhaps of all time. I don't know. I couldn't tell you. What is true is that just because those are fantastic opportunities, it does not mean that there aren't opportunities today, right? It doesn't mean that the new Google, whatever the hell that is, isn't in the works right now. Maybe it's Ethereum or one of these blockchain things, right? Certainly, some of those companies have done really well and experienced a lot of explosive growth, right? So it's very, very. I think it's very easy to look at the marketplace and to get down, to get. I'm not sure that discouraged is the right word, but maybe it is, to kind of feel as though you missed the boat on what would have been the right time or opportunity to invest. And, I mean, I don't want to say that there's no truth to that, in the sense that there weren't good times or there weren't better times. But I also want you to understand that it's always the right time to be investing, because that's about preparing for the future, right? And that's about acquiring for yourself something that's going to pay you and take care of you. And there's never a bad time to do, like, for example, if we could just say you're going to hire somebody to do 10% of the work around your house, it's always a good time whether that person costs half or twice as much, right? They're still going to do 10% of the work around your house. If you can hire enough of them, 10 of them to be specific, then you have no more housework to do, right? And it's the same thing about if I'm buying assets and they pay me, I don't know, maybe let's say 3 years ago I was looking at properties that could cash flow $15,000 a year. And so in theory, I could buy 5 or 6 of them and I could replace my income and retire, in theory, right? Maybe today they're only cash flowing 7,500. So maybe I'm going to need twice as many. Maybe I'm going to need, 12 or 14 to retire. The math hasn't really changed, right? Just the number that I need has gone up, but it's still going to work out good for me. At the end of the day, in life, you kind of have two options. You trade yourself and your time for money, or you trade your money for things for money. Right? Those are your options. You trade yourself and your time for money, or you trade your money for things for more money, right? Perfect example of that, just to make the point super clear, right? Perfect example of that, Pokemon cards. I was joking with my buddy the other day, a friend of mine I grew up with since, 8 years old or whatever. And, he's got a son now. And I was saying to him, you guys have a college fund or whatever going, because his son's, I don't know, 4 or 5 already. So, and he was saying, they're saving and whatever. And I was saying, because he's a big nerd, love video games and Pokemon and all that stuff. And I said, why don't you just get him a Charizard? Let's get him a Charizard card, and that'll pay for his whatever he wants to do by the time he's ready to graduate or go to school. And he laughed at me. But I was dead serious, because he loves cards. He loves this stuff, right? He knows what a real Charizard is. Like, I wouldn't know. I'd get ripped off. But he knows. Go buy a real Charizard. Unfortunately, they cost. We looked into it after I was joking with him, because I didn't actually know exactly what they cost. It turns out they're like $50,000. Excuse me. So they're a bit expensive for him to invest in at this point. But obviously, if they're worth $50,000 today, chances are And of course, Pokemon cards are very speculative. They don't have a value outside of someone else buying them, but still, chances are they're worth 50 grand today. 20 years from now, there will be fewer of them in circulation and more nostalgic people with money who can afford to buy one. Excuse me, there's that cough I saw. Right? So that would be a perfect example of an investment where you are allowing the thing to accrue the value for you, right? And you can obviously do that in lots of ways. Owning a business is still a thing. Owning stocks is just a fractional ownership of a thing, right? But fundamentally, you got to make the choice, and we're all here hopefully because we've made that choice in the right direction. Am I going to make my money primarily by trading my time and my life for things, or am I going to make my money by trading my money for things that are then be traded for better things, right? That Charizard card, somebody bought that card for whatever, $50, $100, $1,000 on the run up to $50,000, right? Somebody got that card out of a pack they paid $3 for, right? That's how these things work, right? And I think one of the things that really trips people up with this concept of trading money for things for money is that everybody looks at that and says, how can I trade $5 and turn into 50,000? How can I find a pack of Pokemon cards and then get the Charizard and immediately make $50,000? This is jackpot thinking, this mentality, this casino, I want to win it, betting, short-termism kind of a thing. And obviously, that's hard to do. In fact, it's so hard to do, I can't give you a roadmap, nor can anybody else. Anybody who claims that they can is probably trying to defraud you, although, it'd be cool if they aren't and they could actually teach something, but probably they're trying to defraud you, right? It's basically an impossible thing to do. Though there are lots and lots and lots of people out there who will sell you on it and scam you on it and tell you about this and that altcoin and this and that Bitcoin, this and that, blah, 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 whatever, how you're going to get rich in 10 seconds, right? Obviously, it doesn't work. You can get lucky. You can make lots of money. I'm not even going to sit here and tell you that you got to get rich the slow way, because that's just absolutely not true. I mean, I can literally think of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars that I made out of basically thin air on cryptocurrency. And I'm not saying personally, but between myself and the people that I advised at the time, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars out of thin air, and not in a long period of time. So it is possible to make money quickly and from nothing. But it's very unpredictable. It's very I couldn't have told you at the time, referring specifically to cryptocurrency, I could not have told you at the time that the people were going to end up making as much money as they wound up making off of those investments that I advised and made myself. I couldn't have told you. I could only tell you it was going to go up, and the rest was just luck. And it could have gone up a hell of a lot less, and I still would have been right. But I wouldn't be able to say, oh yeah, you made all this quick money. So quick money comes usually to those people who are in a position to take the risk, right? If I go back to the cryptocurrency example, right? Years ago, I started telling people in my orbits, hey, you got to do this. You got to buy this. And some people did. And I remember one person in particular, just a dude who had lots of money. And he was like, yeah, Aaron, okay, I got money to throw around. Let's buy some. He made hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars off of what he ended up buying, because he had I don't remember at the time, $25,000, $30,000, whatever it was, right? To take the risk, right? Whereas I knew other people who needed the money a lot more, would have benefited a lot more from the money, but they couldn't afford to take that risk with me, right? So, some of those people, maybe they made $2,000, $3,000. I'm not saying they didn't make anything, right? But at the end of the day, they didn't have $30,000. They didn't have $20,000 to take that chance, right? And that's how you end up with those big gains. Now, if you can't afford that, then what you need to remember is it's about incrementalism, right? I'm going to use the casino as an example. I went to the casino a few weeks ago. I think that's actually how I got COVID. And yeah, again, COVID sucked. But at the casino, I went to the casino. Casinos, I'm not much of a gambler, but casino's not bad. It can be fun. I was on a mission. I wanted to play roulette. And, I'm sitting there at the roulette table, And I cashed in whatever, I don't know, $250 or whatever. And then I get approached by security. Come with, could you speak with you, sir? Blah blah blah. Turns out you gave us $100 bill. It's counterfeit. It's phony as a $3 bill. And this guy's talking to me about this $100 bill I gave him. Blah blah. Where'd you get it? Etc. Etc. And he goes, yeah, you want to see the bill? Blah blah blah. And I'm like, yeah, I want to see this $100. You guys are trying to rip me off. Blah blah blah. He pulls out this $100 bill. I swear to God, I did not hand this guy this $100 bill. So when I'm looking at this $100 bill, this is the fakest fake. Like, this bill is so phony. Anyways, I like unbelievably phony. I wish I had a bill with me right now. Oh, I do have a bill actually here. Hold on. So here's a $10 bill. If you can see on the screen, if you can't, don't worry. You can imagine one. You know what they look like, the plastic ones. So I have a $100 bill, same thing. And there's that like clear bit in the middle, right? Or whatever, off to the one side. And in that clear bit, there's like the silver foil or whatever. And if you look on that foil, it'll actually say the value of the bill. So this is a 10, so it says 10, 10, 10 in like bigger and smaller fonts, right? So I had a $100 bill, same exact thing, except that foil said it was a $5 bill. it was a janky fake. Anyways, I don't know how I did it, but I accidentally gave him this $100. So he takes me through the thing, whatever, blah, blah, blah. Okay, well, we're taking your $100 bill. I was like, well, I didn't think you'd give it back to me. It's fake as hell, right? So now I'm down $100, which pisses me off because I didn't come to the casino to give them money. So now I have to pay another $100, even though I only have $250 worth of chips, right, to cover that $100 that was fake. And so now I'm $350 in at this roulette table, and I haven't won any money. Yeah, I'm actually down $100. And that cheesed me, so I want to make my money back. So I started playing roulette. And you know what the rule with roulette is, and you will understand this immediately if you think about it from the side of the casino instead of from the side of the player. Casinos are licensed to print money. It's one of the reasons why they're restricted by the government. Is like, it's super desirable to own a casino. Everybody would if they could. Why not? The house always wins. Everybody knows this. The game is rigged in their favor. And the game is about taking money from people. So they're always getting money. Well, how do they do that? How do they accomplish that? They play the odds, right? They play the probabilities, right? And how do they play the probabilities? Well, there's a couple things. First, they play on people's greed, right? People want to turn $1 into $500,000. And naturally, the odds on that must be super duper low. And so they can capitalize on that. But also, there are people who are willing to play games with more reasonable odds, like blackjack, like roulette, like baccarat, like what's the one, craps, right? These are games with much better odds than, say, a slot machine trying to win the $500,000 jackpot, right? But the casino still wins on those games as well. How do they do that? Well, on a roulette table, for example, you have 36 spaces, right? 1 through 36. Plus, on an American style, you have a 0 and a 00. And on a European style, you have a 0, 00, and 000, or something like that, right? Which means that you have a 1 in 39 chance or a 1 in 38 chance to hit your number. And depending on how you bet it, it works out that you have like a 45% chance to hit blacks or reds or odds or evens, right? So the casino always has that 5% advantage over you. They've got the 55% chance to win, right? Or they've got obviously 37 out of 38 ways to take your money if you're betting on the inside, whatever it is, right? And so the casino is always winning like that, right? And so now you as a gambler, and this is true of your money no matter where you are, whether you're gambling or investing or whatever, you've got to make a decision, right? So I'm going to use roulette as an example. I can bet $5 on any number on the board, right? And let's just say we're playing a standard American roulette table. So it's 1 to 36. I can pick any number I want, 1 to 36, and my odds are 1 to 36 to hit that spot. I will win 36x my bet if I pick the right spot, right? So really, really simple math, very easy to understand. 36 times 5, I don't remember exactly what it is, but it's like $300, something like that. Actually, going to do it for you right now, just so we're all on the same page. So $180, sorry. Cool. So at a cost of $5 per bet, I can make $180. That is very similar to me saying that I want to spend 50 cents and win $500,000, right? It's low risk, high reward. Well, my odds are 1 in 36. So if I play 36 times, I will have spent $180 to win $180. Of course, the odds don't work like that because actually my odds are 1 out of 38, not 1 out of 36. We're not including those 2s at 0 spots. And that's how the casino, it's rigged in their favor, right? So then I'd actually have to pay $190 to win back $180 over time. And so if we play enough iterations of the game, the casino is going to make $10 off of every 36 bets I make. Something like that. It's roughly how the math works out, right? So that's really awesome for the casino. It's really bad for me. And I've got to be mindful of this as a bettor, right? So if I want to turn my $5 into $180 and I've got a 3,600% increase it, that's very, very difficult to do. However, if I sit down at that roulette table and I say I want to make $180, which in my case is what I want to do. I want to make about $200. I want to get my $100 back and I want to be up a little bit. Well, if I try to do it by betting $5 at a time to win $180, that's a very, very difficult thing to do. But if I bet $1,800, well, now instead of needing to make 3,600% on my money, I need to make 10% on my money. Right? Now, my odds of winning 10% of what I bet, much, much higher, much more controllable odds than of winning 3,600x. 3,600%. Those are much lower odds, right? And so this is how we have control. It's called position investing. You have control of position, right? You might also call it terms, and if you're speaking specifically of real estate investing. I can't necessarily control what the market does, and I can't necessarily control which direction it moves in. But I have control over the bet I'm willing to make and what returns I'm looking for, right? And over time, instead of thinking small and betting $5 or 50 cents and hoping to hit the jackpot, I can bet a much, much larger amount of money, but aim for a much, much more modest return and reduce my risks of losing. Again, nothing's guaranteed. Certainly, this is not a gambling or investing advice. Don't go to the casino and be like, well, Aaron told me to make a big bet. Don't do that. This is just an example, just illustrating, right? But it is much, much easier now for you to, for example, take your $1,800, win 10%. Just to do the math there, right? To win 10% on, say, a roulette table, you double up if you bet the outside. So if you bet red or black, right? So if I bet $1,800 on black and I double it, boom, I've made $1,800, right? Obviously, it'd be stupid to put it all on black. It's like 10% chance of losing everything, right? Decent odds, better than the slot machine, right? I'm probably better off putting $1,800 on red at a roulette table than I am betting at a slot machine, right? But still not good odds. But I could take maybe $180 of my $1,800, right? That's 10%. I could bet it on red. It's almost a 50-50 chance that I make $180. Boom, I made my 10%. I walk away from the table. I've made my money for the day, right? Maybe I lose, do it again. Maybe I need to win back-to-back twice to make $360 to kind of get ahead 180. But you see what I mean with we're taking this smaller bet, right? And we're putting all of our hopes on this tiny little bet that has a very low probability of success, which means that most of the time we're disappointed, right? If you go to the lottery and you buy your Lotto Max ticket or whatever, yeah, hey, if you hit that jackpot, you're set for life, of course, or at least for a long time. But, you're more likely to get hit by lightning than to win the damn jackpot. So why even take that bet? It's a bad bet, right? Whereas if you're willing to just muster a bit more resources, then you can bet on a smaller piece. Like at the end of the day, I'm just gonna, if I could guarantee you 10% per year return on something, right? Then realistically, to live a life, like a normal life, nothing extravagant or fancy, $60,000 a year kind of thing in life, you need to put $600,000 in the bank. You're done. That's all you need, right? Now, you could also do the same thing by putting $6,000 and betting it and making 10x, right? You can do that too. It's just your odds of being able to sustain $6,000 and $60,000 winnings year over year, basically they're zero. There's not really a way to do that, right? Whereas that 10%, 10% is a little high. It's achievable. It is a little high. You'd be overperforming a bit, but you can do that, right? The average return per year, stock market, 7%. Okay, lots of real estate investors do between 8 and 12% per year, right? Lots of them. So you're looking at somewhere between 7 and 12% per year return that you can basically guarantee on your money. I could show you, well, I don't have access to any right now because I'm not accredited, but I used to be able to show you. I could certainly get you in touch with some people who can show you development deals that pay 20% per year. And yes, there's a risk that you lose everything, so or some of it. So they don't always end up working out to be 20%. Sometimes they only work out to be 15%, after they're adjusted for, delays and things like that. But 15 to 20% per year, right? It's all about the mentality, right? It's all about your perspective on things and understanding that our society is hell-bent on selling you on instant gratification. Go big or go home, get it all now. Turn $5 into 50,000, and that's cool. And if it happens, it's exciting and it's an amazing story. And there's a part of the reason why everybody likes it is because that'd be easy. How awesome would it be? You go make one good bet and you're set for life. The problem is that it's completely unrealistic. I've recommended it before, but there's a great book. It's called Thinking in Bets by Annie Duke, and she's a poker player, or was a professional poker player. And the book is all about how you need to stop looking at these sort of big narratives about how to get ahead and how you're going to make this one good decision and it's going to take care of your life. And you need to start recognizing that life is about betting constantly, that you're always sitting at the poker table, blackjack table, whatever it is. And so how am I going to consistently make bets that, obviously there are going to be ups, there are going to be downs. I'm going to win some and I'm going to lose some, but that trend over time towards me winning more often than I lose, right? And that is exactly what the casino does, right? Like if you're asking yourself, or you're sitting here asking me, the screen, how can I do that? Well, the answer is casinos already do it every single day, right? There's a blueprint for this, both in how casinos run, also brokerage firms. I mean, there's a lot of places where people have decided or have worked hard to take the uncertainty out of the day-to-day and to leverage other people's willingness to take risk against their own, right? Because real estate investing is a perfect example. If I buy a property, I'm taking the risk that property is going to do well, that the fundamentals of the market are going to perform in my favor, right? If I don't buy property, I'm taking the opposite risk, that the fundamentals won't do well, that the economy won't do well, that I'm better off with the cash than I am with the asset. Everybody's taking a risk. So the question is, how does your bet stack up against the other guy's bet? Are you in a position to win more often than you lose or not? I argue, and have for years now, that real estate is one of those perfect examples of taking the long-term bet, right? If you're betting on real estate, you're essentially making yourself into the casino, right? In a lot of ways, you're saying, hey, look, the market might go up, the market might go down. I couldn't tell you. Just like the casino day-to-day, couldn't tell you if you're going to win or you're going to lose on any given day when you visit the casino. They don't know. Maybe you'll be a winner. But at the end of the day, after 50,000 people have come and played my casino games, I know I'm making money. Even if, I don't know, Dylan here walks out of my casino $20,000 richer, everybody else has left $35,000 poorer. So I netted $15,000, right? That's how the casino business works. And the real estate is the exact same thing. It's not the exact same thing, but it's similar, right? If I buy a house, it's cool if that house goes up in value. Maybe it does. It's cool if I can appreciate the home. Maybe, do some rentals, find some additional value, right? At the end of the day, even if I can't, I'm going to rent the house out to you. You're going to pay more in rent than I pay in mortgage. I'm going to end up ahead. If the house appreciates, I'll end up that much further ahead. And if it doesn't, you still paid off my mortgage. I at least end up with the principal recapture, right? You're paying down the principal on my mortgage, so that's mine. Plus, I own this house. Hopefully, after expenses and everything, your rent payment, there's actually a little bit left over, so I'm making a profit. Hopefully, right? Cash flow, and I'm just slowly moving ahead, right? So that's where the focus needs to be, right? Is how do I make those bets in such a way that they continue to empower me to win in the long term, right? And certainly, um, we see it or you hear it in the media, in the public, and probably in the people that you speak to, this sort of obsession with short-termism that, oh, you know what? I can't turn my $5 into $50,000, so there's no opportunities in the world. And if you just reverse that, turning $5 into $50,000 is basically impossible in the short term. But turning $50,000 into $50,005, it's so easy that if I were to propose the idea to you, you'd all laugh at me and be like, Aaron, you're thinking too small. $50,000 to gain an extra $5 of that'd be easy as hell. In fact, I probably turn $50,000 into $55,000 without too much effort, right? And that's true, right? Because that'd be a 10% increase. I've already outlined how you could do it at the casino, though that is definitely risky because there are no guarantees there. The game is rigged against you. But you can do it in a variety of other ways, right? You can make an investment. You could build you could take your $50,000. You could spend, I don't know, $500, make like the ultimate lemonade stand, employ a couple child slaves, and just put them to work, right? You got your kids out there. You ain't paying them nothing. They're making your lemonade and they're selling it to people. Give it a couple of weeks, maybe a summer. You have your $500 back. Maybe even you have some money to pay the kids a bonus, so you weren't just taking advantage of them, right? So there's lots of possibilities when you take the resources and you want to earn a small portion of them back, 5%, 10%, whatever it is. Trying to do the opposite is really, really difficult. And so we see the emphasis always for most people is to try to take that small amount and make an outsized profit off of it, rather than take a large amount and make a modest profit off of it. That's where your focus needs to be, right? Taking that large amount, making a modest profit. If I can turn $100,000 into $10,000 a year, then I need to get $1 million so I can have $100,000 per year, right? If I want to have $1 million per year, well, then I need $10 million, right? That needs to be the mentality rather than this, I want to turn $10,000 into $10 million. Yeah, absolutely. Everybody does. Very, very difficult thing to do, right? Whereas if instead I can turn $100,000 into 110, I can grow that. Eventually I can make that into 200, 400, 700, $1 million, et cetera, right? And depending on what growth you're aiming for, right? 5, 10, 15%. You do the math on compounding returns. A 10% return adds up very, very quickly. If you start with $100,000, you will end up a multi-millionaire over the course of just one life, right? So something to think about. The mindset, the mentality, the staying committed to acquiring and accumulating assets, right? And understanding that there's so much noise in the world in terms of negativity, the media, the world's coming to an end, Putin, World War III, Joe Biden, senile, whatever, they're turning the kids frogs gay, I don't know. But, the world is so full of negativity and pessimism about today and the future. And you need to understand where that's coming from and then defend yourself against it, because it's poison for your soul. It's not going to help you to grow and take the action that you need to actually make tomorrow better, right? And I hope I just made it clear with the casino example. It's like it's the math is super duper simple, really. It's just about understanding how to apply it into your own life. Yeah, so thank you for your time. I'm gonna call it here. I actually meant to finish up 5-10 minutes ago because I've got to go somewhere. So I'm going to run. But again, thank you for joining me today. As always, I hope that so far, back to school season for those of you who have kids who are that age, or family members, cousins, nephews, whatever. We just started back to school, so I hope they're having a good time. And hopefully, as we transition into the fall, you're preparing to buy your next property or what have you. Let me know if there's anything I can help you out with, as always. And we will hopefully speak very, very soon. You have a great day.